There's a popular video title in the Flesh and Blood realm of Is Flesh and Blood too expensive? Is the game affordable enough for people out there? Is the game and the game pieces out there too pricey, right? Is Flesh and Blood too expensive? You've seen this on the Reddits, on the X's or Twitters, you've seen this on YouTube, you've seen it everywhere at least once, maybe twice, and possibly 10 plus times, right? And it's a very logical and a very good discussion from fellow content creators, and it's a really good question to ask from time to time. I'll agree. And there's a lot of times where I look at Flesh and Blood cards and I think, damn, that is pretty pricey. Or there's sometimes I want to build a deck and I'm like, well, I don't really want to shell out that much money for each of those majestic cards, and since I have to do 3-ofs. And it's a good topic, even though it may not be a really good topic over at Legend Story Studios, where they're just like, come on, guys. Long story short, it's a good topic. However, it leads me into a quandary of sorts in this question that I haven't been able to answer. And that is the title of this video, which is, if the Flesh and Blood is too expensive, then why are the booster box prices close to or below MSRP? Like, how does that make sense? Like, hear me out. If the card prices overall and the deck prices are too high, then wouldn't the boxes that are being sold be inflated? Maybe at least 50% higher, or 100%, or 200% higher, so they'd sell for like $150, $200, $250? Like, you see where I'm going here? Like, if the cards overall, if we're saying Flesh and Blood is too expensive, then why are the box prices near or below MSRP? Some are even like way late, below MSRP. And it really does make you question, like, what's the deal here? Because maybe, I know just maybe, everything now is as it should be. And that is a very scary realization that you come to. And maybe that is not true. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe you can tell me down below. It's a very simple question. I don't have the answer. And it's a very simple question. And I'll reiterate. If the single cards in Flesh and Blood, right, if the price to construct decks, right, are so erroneously high, where they are legitimately like around $800 for a competitive deck, up to, you've seen competitive decks in like the 1500 range, depending if they need a fable or two, or normally just one fable. But long story short, they're in the 800 to 1500 range. They're pretty damn pricey, right? If that is the case, then why are the boxes so cheap? And I guess it really delves into the point of, well, there's a lot of Majestics in the box, but only one or two have significant value. A lot of the other ones are kind of not as expensive, right? And we've even seen Majestic cards go from like F tier $1 to like $50 cards. I'm looking at the Illusionist, what is it? The Phantasmal Claw. I can't remember it exactly. I sold a couple of those when they hit a high. Now they're back down to 10. And you've got some like Surgical Extraction card that when it came out, people were so upset because it was short printed and it was like $50, $60 a card, maybe even more. And now I just looked it up, it's $7 a card. What is this? And then you have different price variations where cards can go up and down. Like the Stalagmite of Bastion, right? That used to be an $80 card, and then Ice was dead. And then that went down to $20 or even $15 a card. And now it's back up to $90 a card. You have these points in the meta and the hotness and what's fresh and what's happening, and that's why cards can go up and down. And then Rosetta right now is doing pretty good. It's like $110 a box, but that's because those heroes are valued and in the meta, and you see them in a lot of decks. But what happens when Verdance LLs and then Florian LLs? What's that going to do to the price and the EV of the box? Because, hear me out, if the box has an expected value, meaning if you look at all the ratios of your pull rates and everything, and you aggregate it over 100 boxes of, here's the odds of pulling everything, and you're like, okay, in this one booster box, the expected value is higher than the actual price. It's called inverted EV, right? It rarely happens in TCGs, in my opinion. I don't think it happens as much as people say. It did happen in Flesh and Blood for a time with Arcane Rising, and you saw a lot of people mass box opening there. It's simmered down in that aspect. And Arcane Rising still is a premium because of the Command and Conquer. But overall, there are no boxes that have inverted EV. So, like, long story short, you have these card prices of like specific ones, like legendaries and majestics mainly. Those command the most amount of the dollars out there. And a lot of them are either really good and they stay at the high price point, or they, either A, they maintain a high price and are at a high price. A good example is Command and Conquer. Or B, they're at a high price, but then something happens and they living legend and they go down. I'm looking at Surgical Extraction there. I guess more were printed, so that the price went down. And then you have other ones like, I don't know, let's with some stupid majestic that was like 25 cents to 50 cents, like I don't know, Old, and then that went to like $15 recently, and I think it's dropped down to 10. You have different scenarios where either it is expensive and it stayed that way, it was expensive but then something shifted in the meta and now it's down, or got reprinted and now it's down, or it used to be down and now it's up. So you have these different scenarios where the market has different fluctuations. It's all in flux and flow, and things are happening. And it really makes me wonder if that's really the whole point of what was happening here. And maybe this is really what it should be. And it does, let me digress into the competitive play and building a competitive deck. If you're building an $800 to $1,500 deck, that's pretty pricey. That sucks. What's good about it is when you buy these collectibles and you have them high priced, what Flesh and Blood has done to maintain their uniqueness and the price value is they are used till the end of time, right? Now, certain cards can go out of usage because of the meta shift where someone LLs and it's not used, but then they'll create a new hero. But long story short, you can use those cards till the end of time. There's no rotating format. But even still, that's a pretty penny to pay for a deck. And if you think about, normally decks contain 2 legendaries, right? I would say, on average, the equipment slots, you're usually having 2 legendary cards. If you think about creating a deck, and let's say you hit all the legendaries that you want, right? How many boxes would it take to get those 2 legendaries? And on average, if you think about it, just building a deck with 2 legendaries, right? And you open a number of boxes to get those 2 legendaries. It's on average going to be 8 boxes, right? Because the pull rate is 1 in 4. 8 boxes is $800. See where I'm getting at? So it really leads me onto the conclusion is, was this expected from the get-go? Is $800 or $1,000 kind of like a mark for what a constructed, good, finalized deck is? Now, if you want to get an intro deck where you have these new the armory decks, you can spend $100 and you get like a pretty good deck, but you still need to tune it up afterwards. And when you do those tune-ups, then you get to the $800 range. It really makes me wonder, right? Because people bitch and complain and moan, and I understand. It sucks, right? If you don't have the money to get a deck you want to play and have fun with, it just sucks, right? And a lot of times I think that people just, if you don't have the money, you get a job. Or you figure out how to make money and then use that money to buy the cards you want. I think that's the honest truth with a lot of it. But other times I totally understand. It sucks when you cannot, or you just look at a deck and you're like, I do not want to pay $300 for like a handful of cards to make this deck. It's just not happening. Then you just have to wait, right? It is a downer from that aspect, but that feeling of angst, I think if you just bubbled up deep inside, right? Instead of like, being upset and angry. It's like that's the reason why these are collectible. If everyone had all the cards, it wouldn't be collectible, right? So that's my general philosophy around that. But going back to the original question in the beginning of the video, which none of what I've said answers, why aren't the booster boxes more expensive if the cards in Flesh and Blood are expensive, right? It just doesn't make sense. And I would love to have active discussion with people out there. You just type in the comment section down below. Let me know. I'm really curious because Brian Gottlieb a while back had an interview with a guy. Great interview. Gottlieb is so good at talking about Flesh and Blood and the whole concept or just different areas of Flesh and Blood, but specifically about capitalism and how he's like, hey, like this isn't like the perfect system, but it's the best system that we have currently in order to fund a premium great game and produce it, right? Like it's the best system so far, which is essentially loot boxes, right? Let's be real. Like gambling loot boxes, but with also a game aspect in it, right? Because when you have like draft and sealed, of course you're having different variations of cards that you're drawing upon based off of the packs, which makes the game interesting and adds the variance and the fun aspect of it. But it also adds, of course, that's like the key of gambling. Like you get something different every time, and it could be hits or non-hits, and you have to go from there. But I really like how he summed it up. Like, hey, like this isn't like the perfect, and if anyone else out there has a better system, we're open ears on how that makes on how to do that to where we can, keep the lights on and have enough revenue that matches the current system. And I've seen a lot of games out there in the video game industry do free to play with premium loot boxes. It'd be interesting to see Flesh and Blood do something with bulk, I think, where you could literally label Flesh and Blood a free game, free TCG. You get free cards from your LGS. That'd be kind of neat. But and then if you want the premium cards, obviously you buy the booster boxes, you buy the expensive cards on the secondary market. But I've seen that is a trend that we haven't seen transfer in the TCG realm, and that's a whole nother video within itself of hey, why don't we have like a freemium model where you just get cards for free, but then if you want the more expensive ones, then you have to pay. That'd be kind of an interesting model right there. But overall, I agree with his analysis that the current method of, hey, you need to have booster boxes where it is gambling. Some people win, sometimes, and a lot others lose because like that's the whole point of gambling, right? you are buying a box, you're opening random amount of random cards, and sometimes you get hits, and sometimes you don't, and that's the fun of it, right? Because it wouldn't be fun if every box had a hit. Then it'd be like, oh, I got another cold foot. Like it wouldn't be as fun. So you have this system in place, and that system of shoving money down and gambling is what funds the whole operations of Legend Story Studios, and all trading card games do this, right? It's not just Flesh and Blood. All trading card games have this collectability mindset and perceived value and price per card. It's all intertwined is that whole system, right? And Flesh and Blood utilizes it, but all the other games do too. But that's a separate topic. The whole question that is a subtopic for is why are booster boxes hovering around MSRP and they are not more money? If the game is too expensive, which I agree with, to an extent, right? Some cards, like whoa. But if the game is too expensive, why are the box prices so low? It just doesn't make sense to me. And of course, the quick answer is, well, because certain cards, Bronson, are really expensive. So you might have a card pool of a bunch of cards for a bunch of sets, but only select ones are really expensive. And like that, when you're looking at the EV, kind of smooths out over a bunch of boxes if only 1 or 2 or 3 cards are really expensive. But it's still such a weird dynamic, because I would think if the game was too expensive, if Legend of Story Studios did not print enough cards, we'd see that reflected in the box prices. We'd see the card prices go up overall. Here's what I would expect. Card prices go up across the board for a bunch of different ones because of the supply and because of the demand, right? And stores in the background do their number calculations on their calculator, right? And go like beep bop boop 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 and say, hey, I buy this box for $65 from distro, and the EV on this box is $120. Shit, I can make some money here. Let me buy a bunch from distro, crack them all, and then sell the singles and get me a good 20-30%, pretty easily over the next 1 to 2 months. But you don't see that as much out there in the market. And because you don't see that, then it really makes me wonder if the card prices and that assertion that Flesh and Blood is too expensive is really true. Because if it was true, it'd be reflected in the box prices. But the box prices are not too crazy. So it makes me wonder, are card prices really too expensive? Are they really that expensive? It's a good question. And a lot of times on my channel, I like to give you my theories and reasonings and give you a warm feeling like, oh, wow, Bronson solved it in some way. But I haven't solved it. I have no idea. If you know, let me know. I'd love to hear what type of explanations you guys have for this conundrum and this mystery that I'm putting you on, and go down that rabbit hole. Because for me, it doesn't add up. And I'm not, if I can end and summarize it, I'm not belittling anyone for having the opinion of Flesh and Blood is too expensive. If you want to have that opinion, I fully respect that, and I relate to that whole sentiment in certain aspects here and there. Like I do see how sometimes things can get a little crazy, right? Especially when certain cards are spec'd up, an astronomical price in the short term. Over like a month or something, cards might be like really crazy valued. So I do understand that sentiment, and it is a good conversation to have. I think that this conversation that I'm having is more of a retort to that original question of, okay, if you think card prices of Flesh and Blood are too expensive, why are booster box prices around what should be selling for around MSRP or lower, right? Why have they not reflected that increase and that price appreciation over? Because if half of the boxes were like at $200 a box, then that assertion that the card prices and Flesh and Blood prices are too expensive would have a little bit more credence. But because they are the way that they are, it makes me wonder, is everything as it is now as it should be? Thanks for watching.